Hi, Piotr.
Hey. Hey, Jan-Ove. Hey, Piotr.
Hi.
Hey, Peja.
Hey, all of you. Nice to see your faces.
Yeah, nice to see you. Hey, Veijo.
Hey, Jan-Ove.
Hello, Veijo. Hello, Jan-Ove.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, Piotr. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, nice to see you all. You should have been in Longyear, but...
No, it's Gardermoen quarantine hotel. We should sit 10 days in quarantine.
Oh.
So now how does it work?
Oh, yeah.
And how is it?
It's nice,
Hotel.
actually. Better than I was expected.
Okay, yeah.
So lots
That's
of
waiting for me in spring.
You should have been in Longyear, but...
No, it's Gardermoen quarantine hotel. We should sit 10 days in quarantine.
Okay.
How does it work?
Oh, yeah.
And how is it?
It's nice,
Hotel.
actually. Better than I was expected.
Okay, yeah.
There's a strange
That's
echo.
waiting for me in spring.
You should have been in Longyear, but...
No, it's Gardermoen quarantine.
All right, did we get rid of the echo, which was probably due to the live YouTube streaming? Which hotel is it actually, the quarantine hotel in Gardermoen? You are muted. Natalie, you are muted.
Okay. I am in Ton, Oslo Airport Hotel. It's actually 3 hotels, but I'm in this Ton. We can walk around and we have food. So we can walk, of course.
Yeah. Good. All right, it's 3 minutes past the hour. I think it's time to start this SESS release event. So, welcome everybody. My name is Heikki Liavainen. I'm the director of SIOS. First, some housekeeping issues. Let me try to share my screen. So, please keep your camera or video on, so this event it's more livelier and somehow resembles also physical meeting. While doing this, please mute yourself during the presentations. How to ask questions? What we have, the program for this session is that I will give a small talk in the beginning, then next Marta Moleno-Ibanez will tell some background and a framework of a SESS report, and then the authors will represent the chapters of SESS, this new SESS report. After this, we have reserved times to answer questions, and you can ask questions by raising hand in Zoom, or you can write to chat box. And if you are on YouTube, you can also ask questions in YouTube. Yes. So, dear all, it is my honor to open the status of environment science in Svalbard reports release event. This is the third report in series. Like its forerunners, it is based on multifarious contributions from different disciplines within Earth system science. What is SIOS? SIOS, Svalbard Integrated Arctic Earth Observing System, is an international interdisciplinary research infrastructure in and around Svalbard. SIOS focuses on long-term monitoring of key variables in the Arctic to observe, attribute, and describe the effects of global environmental and climate change. SIOS entered into the operational phase in 2018 with a mission to develop an efficient observing system, to share technology, experience, and data, to close knowledge gaps, and to decrease the environmental footprint of science. The annual SESS report is one tool to fulfill this mission. The recommendations in the reports are already being implemented. Not all of them, but some of them, either at the initiative of the SIOS Knowledge Center or by SIOS members as a direct results of collaborating to write SESS chapters or within SIOS in general. I think it's needless to repeat that the year 2020 has been overshadowed by the global COVID-19 pandemic. However, there is a lot to learn for the future. How will the new normal look? How much we will change our behavior? Will we continue or even expand our use of digital technology to interact with each other? Will we increasingly rely on remote and virtual access to keep measurements running and gather samples? This is something that only time will tell. SIOS will certainly continue to strive to be at the forefront of developing new methodologies that ensure high quality observations in Arctic. What comes to SESS report, I would really like to express my deepest appreciations for the editorial board, Agata Chaporska, Jon-Uwe Hagen, Marta Moreno-Ibanez, and Christiana Hübner. It was a pleasure to work with such an enthusiastic team. I would also like to acknowledge my colleagues here at SIOS Knowledge Center. These have been strange times, but we managed to support each other and make the best out of this challenging situation. So, next, Marta Moreno-Ibanez will tell us about the framework and what is SESS report, please.
Hi, my name is Marta. I'm a PhD student in Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Quebec in Montreal in Canada, and I'm also a member of the editorial board of the SESS report 2020. So I'm going to give you a short introduction to the SESS report. As you know, the SESS report is an annual report on the state of environmental science in Svalbard. So why do we care about environmental science in Svalbard? Well, according to the IPCC special report on the ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate, the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the global average, and the sea ice extent has declined, and we continue to decline. So it is very important to study the state of environmental science in Svalbard. It's important to study these changes. Svalbard is a good place to study the Arctic because despite its remote location, it's an accessible place. So first of all, I'm going to give you an overview of the SESS report. The main goals are to document the state of the Arctic in and around the Svalbard, and also to highlight research conducted within SIOS. So every report summarizes the state of the Earth system science in and around the Svalbard, and then based on the unanswered questions, points at research needs, and based on these research needs, it provides recommendations. These recommendations pertain to research priorities and research infrastructure. So at the end, we have recommendations to develop the observance system in Svalbard. And the contribution to the SESS report can be in different forms. So we have reviews, data summaries, or report cards. The review, as the name says, is a review of existing knowledge of the state of a particular field of the Earth system in Svalbard. And data summary analyzes a long-term data series or recently released data series. And finally, the report card, it's an update of data of previous SESS reports. And in addition to these chapters, the scientific chapters, we also have frequently asked questions. These frequently asked questions are written in popular science language because the goal is to make the science language understood by the public. And the SESS report is not only addressed to the scientific community, but also to stakeholders and the public. The SESS report started in 2018. So this is the third SESS report. The editorial board is composed of two senior researchers, which are Agata Zaborska from the Institute of Oceanography of the Polish Academy of Sciences, John Ove Metley-Hagen from the University of Oslo. There are also two representatives of the SIOS Knowledge Center, which are Christiane Hefner and Heikki Havainen. And finally, there's an early career scientist, which is me. So finally, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the SESS report 2020. There are 12 chapters, including a joint statement on snow cover. And these chapters cover a wide range of fields. So there's a chapter about climate change, which is Svalklim. There's a chapter on snow cover, which are Satmo snow, passes and Svalsia. There's a chapter on hydrology, which is Svalhydro. There's a chapter on aerosols, which is Heze. There's also a chapter on coastal ecosystems, which is Svalcoast. There's also a chapter covering geohazards, which is Permasval. And finally, there are two chapters covering observation platforms and instruments, which are UAB Svalbard and SuperDARN. So finally, in the name of the editorial board, I would like to thank all the authors that contributed to the reports for their valuable contributions. And we have very much enjoyed reading these contributions. So thank you very much.
So good morning. I'm Christiane Hübner, the information officer of SIOS, and I will guide you through the release of this third issue of the SESS report. The authors will now briefly introduce their chapters, and we will take the questions after all the presentations have been given. The first speaker is Ada Jammensen from the Meteorological Institute in Norway. Are you there?
I'm here.
Good. I start your presentation.
Thank you.
And you just say next when you want me to change.
Yes. So our group have investigated and compared climate change in Svalbard and Arctic in order to see how representative Svalbard is for future Arctic climate evolution. Next, please. So we have done this by the use of Earth system models, participating in the coupled model intercomparison project phase 6. And output from these models are used in the upcoming assessment report of the IPCC. We have looked at different periods, so the historical period from 1850 to 2015. Here consider output from 48 models. We have looked at future climate scenarios or projections over the period 2015 to 2100, consider output from 23 models and 4 different future forcing scenarios or shared socio-economic pathways. So in total, we have analyzed 140 model simulations of near surface temperature, precipitation, and sea ice extent. And we have defined the Arctic as north of 66 north, which is shown in this figure as the outer red dashed circle, and Svalbard we have defined as, you can see as the inner red dashed region. Next, please. So just some brief results. We find that overall the warming in Arctic and Svalbard is very similar. In the upper figure here, you see the annually average near surface temperature anomaly. By the end of or after 1980, you clearly see Arctic amplification with enhanced warming in Arctic and Svalbard compared to the globe. We find that in Svalbard, even stronger warming compared to the Arctic for the last 35 years of this period. The lower figure also show future projections. We again see that Arctic and Svalbard warms in a similar manner. The warming is much larger compared to the globe. We see a very strong enhanced winter warming. In the worst case scenario, shown here in brown boxes, we find that the winter temperatures in Svalbard rises less compared to the Arctic for the last 30 years of the future projections. But in general, the warming is similar. Next, please. So here we see the sea ice extent. The CMIP6 models exhibit two large sea ice extent in spring, shown here in the left figure, compared to reanalysis data and observational data sets. And over the period 1980 to 2014, we see that the sea ice melts faster around Svalbard compared to the Arctic when we look at percentage change. Next, please. So this is the future sea ice changes. In the right column, you see the ice conditions in the fall. And we see that ice-free conditions are reached under the two scenarios with the strongest warming, shown on brown and purple line. And next, please. Our main recommendations for the future. So in order to integrate more Earth system modeling into SIOS, we recommend to cooperate with the Norwegian National Earth System Modeling Infrastructure Project, INES, to build the modeling tools needed to integrate new SIOS data. We also need to foster e-science tools so that young researchers working in Arctic climate science can efficiently analyze results from such multi-model ensembles as CMIP6. We need to find efficient ways to foster international cooperation to better our understanding of current and future changes in the Arctic climate, possible abrupt climate transitions, and drivers for such changes. Thank you.
Thank you. I may mention that if you have questions on the way, just write them in the chat in the Zoom box. And for you that are following us on YouTube, you can write your questions in the comment box there. Then we continue with the next speaker, which is Lisa Badley from University Center in Svalbard and the Birkeland Center for Space Studies. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Presentation is coming now.
Thank you. So hello, my name is Lisa Badley. I'm an associate professor at UNIS in the Space Physics Group. I'd like to thank my co-authors on this report from Norway, Canada and Japan for their assistance in writing the chapter. The chapter will detail a HF radar system and its use in space physics research on Svalbard, as well as providing information about other instrumentation in the research field. Next slide, please. So space physics deals with the input of energy from solar particles and the solar magnetic field into the Earth's atmosphere. This induces a variety of features. The most well-known of that is the Aurora Borealis, and that's shown in this diagram here in red and green, along with other features that are a result of the energy input. The movement of the atmosphere is regulated by this energy input and can be about 2 kilometers per second. And this is shown by the blue arrows in the diagram at 250 kilometers altitude, and is called ionospheric convection. The diagram also shows the variety of instrumentation on Svalbard, which are used to study these phenomena, such as the radars, the rockets, cameras, and magnetometers. The chapter itself focuses on the SuperDARN radar, which is circled in red, which is an HF over the horizon radar measuring the speed and direction of the atmosphere, this ionospheric convection. The system is owned and operated by the Space Physics Group at UNIS, along with the Shell Henriksen Auroral Observatory, which is also shown in the diagram. Next slide, please. So the SuperDARN radar is located at Brenosa, just outside Longyearbyen, and it consists of 2 rows of about 17-meter high masts on wooden posts driven into the permafrost. This is the view of the radar looking towards Adendalen and Eastfjord. The radar itself is actually part of a larger international network, which I'll describe in more detail on the next slide. It was operational for 2 years, from 2016 to 2018, before it was unfortunately destroyed by ice loading during a storm. A new system has now been designed, and UNIS will rebuild the system this year. Next slide, please. So the Svalbard radar serves both as a standalone instrument, but also part of a global network of over 30 radars covering both the northern and southern polar and mid-latitude regions. And these are operated by research groups from about 10 different countries. They're all over the horizon radars, so they have enormous fields of view. And the 2 diagrams in the bottom here are views onto the northern and southern polar regions, with the radar fields of view overlaid on top as the triangular shaded regions. The red triangle shows the Svalbard field of view, extending out from Svalbard towards Russia and Alaska, covering a previous hole in the network. All the radars work by scanning with a number of beams, 16 in the case of Svalbard radar, and these scan across the field of view. 1 scan takes 2 minutes. And this is shown by the movie in the top right-hand corner. The radars all operate continuously, and the data are provided in real time and available through online open access data portals. The primary data product is the speed and direction of the atmosphere at 250 kilometers, the ionospheric convection, although they do also have other applications. Next slide, please. This diagram shows data from the Svalbard radar and also how they fit in with the rest of the network. So this is again a view down onto the polar regions. Svalbard is located towards the top right, Canada is towards the bottom, and Russia at the top. So the field of view of the Svalbard radar is shown by the large black triangular region. So circled in red are data from the Svalbard radar, and the data are color-coded velocities showing a narrow channel of flow of about 1 kilometer per second flowing from Russia towards Svalbard. Outside of the field of view are other data from other radars, and that's shown slower flows, and this is in the blues and the greens. And then through a synchronization of all the radars across the network, it's possible to create these large global maps and track features as they move across the regions. So the report details the radar system itself, as well as this case study, and provides a summary of data from the 2 years of operation of the Svalbard radar. It details studies of the network as a whole, as well as comparative studies between Svalbard radar and other radars. And some of these studies have also possible societal benefits through the monitoring of so-called space weather. And details of how to obtain the data from the network are also provided in the chapter. Next slide, please. So we made 5 recommendations for the future in our report, which are shown here. And these are centered on maintaining and developing the infrastructure on Svalbard, which provides this continuous open access real-time data for the scientific community. And these include both the continuation of funding for the current radar system, as well as proposed extensions to the Svalbard SuperDARN radar, but also Meteor radar in Adendalen. And we also recommend developing a collaboration with North America to build real-time tracking of these atmospheric features as they move across the polar regions. And for further details, I encourage you all to read the chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then we continue with the next chapter presented by Richard Hahn. Are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm here.
Your presentation will come soon.
All right.
Now.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. For having me. So the chapter that we worked on was called Scientific Applications of Unmanned Vehicles in Svalbard. And you can go to the next slide, please. And as you all know, unmanned vehicles, it's an emerging technology that over the last recent years has seen a tremendous growth, and it has found its place and applications in a really wide range of scientific applications. So our goal was to kind of find out like what's the status, like make an inventory of the different technologies that are used, how they're used in different fields, and how they benefit research. And our focus was in Svalbard, so we really wanted to know like how is this done in Svalbard, because we believe that this has actually offered very interesting insights for SIOS and its partners when it comes to infrastructure and to kind of potential benefits in the future. And then when I talk about unmanned vehicles, then I just want to make sure that like it's a wide range. So it's ranging from like the very small kind of the off-the-shelf little drones that you see in the bottom left, to bigger drones in the top left, or kind of very professional, sophisticated drones like on the top right. But also we have included underwater vehicles, autonomous under vehicles, or surface vehicles, like you can see on the bottom right. So it's kind of a holistic view of all unmanned types of vehicles. Although I have to admit that the special focus was a little bit on aerial systems. So in the next slide, if you go there, please, then you can see basically what we've done. We went out and we did a classical literature search, and we tried to identify all publications that we could find online which would talk about using any kind of unmanned system with their application, especially in Svalbard. So we came up with a big list, and this is an excerpt of it. I think we have about 50 entries that we found. And then we tried to categorize these and try to find like some kind of metadata within this data set, which we then evaluated. So if you go to the next slide, you can see some of these information, and we believe that they already give us some very interesting insights. So this is just an example. On the left side, you see which type of vehicles, which kinds of unmanned vehicles have been used. And you can see that the vast majority of all of these papers were using UAVs, so unmanned aerial vehicles. So hence the focus on aerial vehicles in our study. And then also that it's using this multi-rotor type of vehicle, which are this kind of the off-the-shelf, like the cheap DJI drones. And this is very interesting because it's a very simple, very cheap technology that a lot of people use. And in contrast, if you look at the fixed wings, they are like this bigger, sophisticated aircraft. They're also used, but they're used in a very specialized applications. And on the right side, you see like who's actually using them, and this gives us a little bit an insight on which in which fields are drones mostly used. And I think this gives some insight of which are the fields which could benefit a little bit, which could benefit from using this technology, or which are benefiting now, and where the potential is larger. So if you go to the next slide, then this is just a map that we've done where we try to put a pinpoint of every study that has been done in Svalbard with unmanned vehicles, and you see typically these kind of like hotspots, of course, where you would expect them in Ny Alesund, Longyearbyen, Hornsrud to some degree, and yeah. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the highlights that we come out with. So one of the most interesting findings that we really had was that these off-the-shelf drones, they're used a lot. And they're used by, they offer the very small barrier that gives you a very large benefit for your research. And we've seen that like people use these, and then eventually they really see the benefits of these systems, and that's when they start investing into these more sophisticated, larger fixed wing vehicles. So what we recommend based on this is that we see a clear benefit of using these drones and getting like this bird's eye view with the drone technologies, and we recommend SIOS and SIOS partners to build the infrastructure more and make it easier for people to implement this technology for the research in Svalbard. Because again, the entry barrier should be as low as possible, at least for these very simple types of drones. And then we also saw a lot of issues with accessing data, and like we're generating a lot of data sets, very interesting data sets, but they are not shared at all. So one of the things that we would like to emphasize as well is that there should be long-term data storage, because this will allow us to build long-term monitoring data sets, which could be very interesting given the high resolution and the fairly large coverage of drone footages that you can obtain. So yeah, this was a very nice chapter, I think, for us to write, and I think we are quite happy with it. And I invite you to have a look yourself.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rita Traversi from University of Florence. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Christiane, and good morning, everyone. Our report focuses on the evolution of the Arctic haze in the last decades through the study of its chemical fingerprints, or at least some major features of its chemical fingerprint. And next one, please. Thank you. And to this purpose, we have collected data from 2 locations in Ny Alesund, which are a very well-known observatory, the Zeppelin Observatory, and a newer one, Gruvebadet Observatory, which was set up more recently in 2010. Instead, Zeppelin Observatory is active since the last 27 years. So we have long-term data sets, shorter data set for Gruvebadet, but they are quite interesting to be compared since the 2 sites are close, but located at different altitudes, and especially differently related to their mixing layers. So they are affected by different sources and transfer processes. Next one, please. Thank you. So we have focused on 2 main markers of the Arctic haze, main chemical markers, and we have chosen sulfate and ammonium. Sulfate you can appreciate from the plots here. You can see it's Zeppelin on the top and Gruvebadet on the bottom. You can appreciate the trend of sulfate concentration along through the all investigated periods, and you can see that sulfate is constantly decreasing in the last decades, and you can see it very well at Zeppelin, as it was already spotted in other sites in the high Arctic. And this is very well in line with the decline of sulfur emissions since the early 90s. And in Gruvebadet, such a decrease is not actually well seen. And this could be due to the fact that the temporal frame is shorter, or to the fact that actually Gruvebadet is affected by different processes. So next one, please. This is one point to be developed. Another point to be developed is to see what happens within the year, not only through the years. And within the year, we can see very different behaviors of sulfate in the so-called haze months and not haze months. As representatives of these 2 different situations, we have taken March and September, and you can see in gray the trend of sulfate in March, and instead in orange the trend of sulfate in September. And if it's true that the decline of the Arctic haze drives the decrease of sulfate in March, instead in September we have at both sites a slight increase in concentration. So probably besides a decrease in a certain source, Arctic haze, maybe we have an enhancement in another source, maybe marine biogenic source in summer. So next one, please. The last feature that I wanted to mention here is another important one, which is the acidic or more or less alkaline character of the atmosphere. since we have a decrease in sulfate concentration all through these years, one might think that we are going towards a more alkaline atmosphere. For this reason, one can study the sulfate-ammonium ratio, which gives you an idea of the neutralization processes. And so far, within the large variability of this ratio, actually no clear trend towards a more alkaline atmosphere can be spotted. And these trends need to be studied very carefully, because when you go with the ratio, even a small uncertainty on each one of the parameters actually matters a lot. So it has to be studied further, but we don't see a trend here for this ratio. And yes, the last one, please. I have just summarized 3 points which are important to me to be developed and studied further. But to do so, we have to, firstly, to go on with the measurements that are currently ongoing, both at Zeppelin and Gruvebadet, possibly including other new parameters, climatically relevant parameters as CCM and INP. And this will be important also to define the relationship of the 2 sites with the boundary layer, which is not so clear actually now, and which will be important to define the kind of sources and the kind of value, the regional value, local value that these data have. And in order to carry out this comparison, we do need to harmonize our protocols. And this was also discussed in the last science core data meeting, the need to harmonize protocols from the sampling to the chemical analysis, even to the choice of parameters to be studied. And only in this way, we can achieve at some point an exhaustive picture of atmospheric processes in Ny Alesund and Svalbard. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Ny Alesund from the Norwegian Polar Institute. Nilo, please.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Myself, Ny Alesund, and I will present this chapter on behalf of my co-authors. We built this review chapter on the scientific knowledge and outcomes of published articles and reports. Next, please. Main goal of this chapter is to provide a knowledge on microplastic to public, academia, and also to policymakers in order to give good advice on how to protect the Svalbard environment from plastic pollution. Finding of microplastic in sea ice, snow, water, sediment, and organisms in Svalbard shows that archipelago is not isolated from the pollution generated from other parts of the world. Next, please. On the basis of knowledge attained from literature, we have identified what we know and what we don't know about microplastic in Svalbard. We know that microplastic can enter to Svalbard from local and long-range sources, but we don't know about their influence on the Arctic environment. Next, please. Microplastic has been found, as I mentioned, in different environmental compartments of Svalbard, but the exchange between these domains are not known yet. We are aware that climate change is altering the physical environment of Svalbard, but we don't know how these changes are impacting the cycling and transformation of plastic. Also, it is not clear how the ultimate fate of microplastic is changing with the climate. Next, please. After entering to the Svalbard environment, microplastic deposit in sediment, soil, and ice, but there is a lack of information about the burden of plastic in environmental compartment. Next, please. To close these knowledge gaps, we have provided 5 recommendations in this chapter. First one is harmony. There is an urgent need for harmonization of methodologies, and a workshop is needed to facilitate the agreement among international microplastic experts on microplastic monitoring. To follow up this, a Svalbard task force is needed, need to establish, which can meet regularly to develop methods and monitoring recommendation to ensure our concerted efforts to fulfill the identified knowledge gaps. Next, please. And to establish a reliable risk assessment for both the environment and human consumer, mapping is very important to take on the priority. Next, please. Long-term monitoring should be started immediately after the first recommendation, and this monitoring program should be designed to include the societal needs. Next, please. 5th recommendation is for conducting the experimental studies on Arctic key species under Arctic conditions, because most of the available data and knowledge is lab-based, which we think cannot give a complete idea about the region like Arctic. Yeah, and I invite you all to read our chapter for further details. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilo. So we move on to the next chapter presented by Janne Søreide from University Center in Svalbard.
Yes, do you hear me, Christiane?
Yes.
Yeah, and there I see my presentation. Thank you. Yes, so this chapter on the coastal systems in Svalbard is by many co-authors. And next, please, Christiane. And it's actually based on a workshop almost a year ago, just before everything closed down. I'm happy we had it in February. A workshop called Sustainable Svalbard Coasts, financed by Svalbard Science Forum, where 35 scientists, managers, stakeholders, and others gathered. They discussed, they presented their work, shared their knowledge, and we actually were there together to try to improve the coastal monitoring in Svalbard. As you know, the coastal ecosystem are very diverse and dynamic, and we need some joint effort there. And it was also motivated by the newly released Arctic Coastal Biodiversity Monitoring Plan, which is made by CAF under the Arctic Council, because there is actually a plan now that it will be a pan-Arctic synthesis of coastal biodiversity, and it's scheduled for completion in 2023. And this leads me to the next slide, Christiane, because this Arctic Coastal Monitoring Plan, they have actually defined 7 different coastscapes, and 6 of these are along the shore. And you see here an effort by us to try to map this in for Svalbard. And these are actually based on aerial photos from the Norwegian Polar Institute, made quite some time ago, 87, 91, during a project I had at that time. And we see that we have mapped 77% of the coastline, but this needs to be revised. But this gives us at least one idea of how the coastscapes are distributed in Svalbard. And we also see that in Ny Alesund, for instance, we have the least data. And we also have problems with the low gradient soft shores, the lagoons and estuaries. So these have actually been grouped here. And this just shows that we need some more work here to actually identify these different nature types in Svalbard. If you go to the next, Christiane. And we also have these fjord coastscapes. And in this Arctic monitoring plan, they have actually just said fjords. But we, based on the data we have from Svalbard, would suggest that we actually divide the fjord coastscapes into 4 different types actually. And this you can read more about in the chapter. If we go to the next. And you know, Svalbard is not homogeneous in the respect of the climate. So we have the very warm West Spitsbergen, and then we have the colder east and northern part of Svalbard. Here you actually see the 2 ice charts from 7th of January this year compared to 7th of January last year. Big differences. It was actually a quite extensive ice year last year. We see it's different this year. And we think that in the future, this will be more likely that we have very little ice in Svalbard. This was also shown by a previous presentation here today. 73% decline I saw. So we think actually, if you go to the next, Christiane, because we see that the fast ice has actually decreased quite tremendous the last 30 years. And we have seen a big change in the West Spitsbergen, but we think now that we will see the greatest change actually in the east and the northern part of Svalbard, that we also need to consider longer time series monitoring in these parts. Go to the next. Because we see that the ecological losers, they for sure include the cold adapted species that rely on sea ice. So this is something we want to investigate it more. And if you go to the next, we also see that there is a coastal darkening due to the increased river runoff and glacier melt. And what is the implication of that? Like, will it be less prime production? Will it be an increase in contaminants, for instance? And if you go to next, there is several ongoing projects on this. This is from Terras and Amanda Poste. We see we have the permafrost thawing, we have the melting glaciers, changes in precipitation runoff and coastal erosion, and all these impact the coastal waters. And we need to investigate this more. Next. But we also have some winners. Warmer climate, higher production often, and we especially see that we have an increase in boreal species, and we also see a big change in the inter and subtidal communities, especially along the West Spitsbergen, where we don't have this ice scoring effect so much more. So then we see actually a lot of macroalgae is present all the way up to the surface. And these, of course, have big implications, and it can be very positive for the coastal biodiversity in West Spitsbergen for many. So this will continue to monitor, and we also expect that this is something we will see in the future in the northern and eastern parts too. Next, please. So our recommendations from, you can read in this chapter, is to improve the international coordination and cooperation to achieve a more holistic and cost-efficient coastal observatory in Svalbard. So that's why I think we were most people from the different field stations around in Svalbard. So we have Ny Alesund, we have Longyearbyen, we have Hornsund. All these are along the west coast. We need something more from the north and east. We also need to generate a list of Svalbard-specific standard coastscapes, the nature types. Which one are the most important to monitor in Svalbard? And this was also based on the map we were doing. And we see that the rocky shore environment is really dominating, but we also have these soft graded nature types. So following up that, we also need to agree on a list of essential focal ecosystem components. That means bioindicators, that could be species, that could be communities, that we need to monitor in these different coastscapes. And then finally, we need to not monitor these specific coastscapes and bioindicators in the West Spitsbergen. We also need to monitor that in the north and the east, where we actually expect now we will find some big changes due to the decline in sea ice. So I think that was it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jana. The next speaker will be Aga Novak, also from UNIS. Aga, are you there? Good.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I have quite a lot of animations on my, but I ask you to present.
I will click you through.
Yeah, awesome, thanks. So the Sval Hydro is an initiative collecting everyone performing long-term hydrological monitoring in Svalbard. And next. And as you can see, there's not many of us, which is not that good, but we are very territorial, which is actually good. And the one thing that is also not that good is you can see on the map here on the left corner that hydrological research in Svalbard is, is biased to the western coast. So we do not have the whole image of the Svalbard, what is exactly going on. Next. So what report actually discovered is we have two main problems with hydrology in Svalbard. And first of all is the problem that concerns the water budget, so water cycle. Next. And the second one is the problem with our perception of how much fresh water is being delivered into the fjords. So the first one, the water budget, you can actually already see where the problem area is. We are talking about water balance, so inputs and outputs of water from the October to September, and you can just put the rest of the slide on. And this, in the current climatic conditions, you see that we have more on the right-hand side. We have more and more positive degree days, so the summer is getting longer. The snow melt starts earlier, and also the freeze-up period starts later. So we have more melting going on. So we are not actually fitting into that definition of hydrological year anymore. We also see there's increasing amount of rainfall in the Arctic. We are going towards a rainfall-dominated Arctic. So what we start in the report, it says we actually went through every single component of the water balance, from precipitation, discharge, groundwater, glacier mass balance, condensation and evaporation. We discussed all of them, and we actually discovered key knowledge gaps. What we've discovered is that well, everything we know about hydrology in Svalbard is outdated and needs a facelift, because it's either does not include the current climatic changes, or it's based on the outdated 30-year-old or circa 30-year-old measurements like condensation and evaporation. So there's a lot of work to be done here. Every single component needs our attention here. And the next. So the second one, you can put two more. The second one is our perception of how much fresh water is being delivered from the Arctic terrestrial environment into the marine environment. And the common perception right now is that we have increasing amount of fresh water being delivered into the system, into the fjords. And this is based on modeling or models, usually glacial models. And what you can put the rest, what you can see and what we discovered in the report based on about 50 years of in situ hydrological data sets is this is not the case for Svalbard. We do not see increasing amount of fresh water being delivered into the fjords from Svalbard. What we do see is it's a big divide. So we have catchments that do contain large polythermal glaciers, or catchments that do not have any glaciers, that have increasing amount of rainfall going into them. That's the majority of the water budget there. That, yes, indeed, produce increasing amount of water, but all the catchments with small glaciers, with cold-based glaciers, with those glaciers that are receding quite fast right now. So there's quite a lot of them in Svalbard. These catchments for decades, more than 10 years, have been actually delivering less and less fresh water into the fjords. And this is insane because what we see is that the models that we have, our perception, does not reflect the reality. And we need to acknowledge that. So we are calling for resurrection of long-term hydrological research in Svalbard that has been quite forgotten, I have to say. So next. So apart from that, and you can just put all those through. So producing a water budget for entire Svalbard, I don't think it's possible yet, but hopefully if we implement all those recommendations, we can start thinking about it. This is something that cannot be done yet. So what we propose is the development, hydrological development of the existing sites that you can see already here, because already quite a lot of money has been put into this, but also we recommend establishing new super sites for hydrological research. And these should be located on the north coast and also on the east coast. And as you can hear from Janne as well, there's quite a lot of difference in climate between north and south, between east and west. And we need to start acknowledging that in our research as well. So what we do call the recommendations is that every single part of the water balance equation needs to be researched again. And I know it's a lot of work, but we have a new system and we need to learn it again. There's quite a lot of changes going on already that we were not aware from the hydrological point of view. And I hope SFILE Hydro, the initiative, will help do that, because now we have a group that works really well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Erik Malnes from Norse.
Thank you. Christiane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Wait a second. There we go.
So our project is SatMod Snow. It's formed by researchers from Norse, NVE, Metno in Norway, and we also had researchers from University of Uppsala and Auroral in Italy. Next, please. The objectives of our project was to study 5 different time series of remote sensing data over snow cover and compare them with hydrological or snow process models from the entire of Svalbard. And we had the different time periods and, of course, different spatial resolutions and different satellites mainly measure snow cover fraction or snow, whereas the models quantify snow water equivalent. So what we did was to cross-compare the different data sets over the overlapping periods and look at the differences. And also we wanted to see how we could improve the models and the remote sensing by doing this intercomparison. Next, please. This is an example where we compared MODIS data with medium resolution, 500 meters, against the AVHRR, which has much coarser resolution. And we could see that for the different years, 2000 to 2015, there were some differences, but the main, of course, the main annual variability is preserved. But we also see that in particular AVHRR have in practice a higher snow cover fraction for in particular for the summer. So this shows that the coarser resolution sensors are not able to capture all the details which could be expected. But we of course the coarser resolution sensors are the ones that have the longest time series. So it's also very important to understand the differences between the different sensors. We also show here the mean difference geographically to the right over entire Svalbard and the entire. So what this map shows is the mean difference between AVHRR and MODIS and the days the number of days with snow cover. So we can see that it's both in some parts of Svalbard there are more days with AHRR, and in other parts it's less days as compared to MODIS. Next slide, please. In this view graph, I show a comparison between MODIS and the Uppsala hydrological model. And what we have compared is we have estimated the snow cover fraction based on the SWE data from or the snow water equivalent data from the Uppsala model, and then compared the products pixel-wise. So we can estimate the annual trend of the snow cover fraction over Svalbard. And actually, what we see is that it's a quite good correspondence between the two data sets for the period we have compared. But also we can notice that there are some differences, in particular geographically. Next slide. So in summary, SatModSnow documented the differences between the three models and the three snow cover data sets. We see that the hydrological models estimate the amount of snow, but this is not currently measured by satellite. So what we have done is to compare the timing when the snow disappeared. In the overlapping period, we found several differences that could result, and this should result in work to improve both the models and the Earth observation data sets. We think that we can use satellite data to improve the snow models. And by integrating satellite data in hydrological modeling, we can obtain improved and more consistent historical data sets that are important for climate research. Is there a new? Yeah, the recommendations. Next, please.
Yes.
So these are the recommendations we have. We need to combine the efforts from snow cover models and Earth observation data to compile long-term time series of snow cover that covers the as long period as possible. In practice, it will be from 1978 to 2020 with as high spatial resolution as possible. Efforts should integrate multi-source Earth observation data, in situ, airborne, and satellite observations with new techniques. For example, using artificial intelligence and data assimilation for improving the characterization of snow cover and snow water equivalent on Svalbard. Hydrologists should utilize Earth observation data to improve the models and in order to capture the snow distribution simultaneously as the SWE estimates are improved. Upcoming data sets from Earth observation will be compared with corresponding layers from modeling, for example, liquid water content in the future. And the snow measurement infrastructure on Svalbard also needs improvements for providing more calibration and validation data from both models and Earth observation data sets. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. The next speaker is Marianne Kilje from Med Norway.
Hello. Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So this chapter is to some extent related to or similar to the previous one just presented by Eirik. It's about long time series for data on snow on Svalbard and sea ice around Svalbard. So how does ground-based observations of snow compare with satellite observations? How does satellite observations of snow compare with a snow model? And do we see any relations between the changes of the snow cover on Svalbard and the sea ice area around Svalbard over time? Next slide, please. The data sets that we have used include a long time series for daily snow cover at 4-kilometer resolution based on a satellite data record. And this data set is our main point of view into this study. So the other data sets, if relevant, have been adapted to the same temporal and or spatial resolution. So the other data sets are 2 data sets for ground-based snow observations. We use a time series of snow-free days derived from model snow water equivalent data. And we use a satellite-based data set for daily sea ice area. The full story is found in the report, but I will present our 2 main highlights on the following slides. So next slide, please. When analyzing the satellite-based snow cover dataset, we found that over this time period, 1982 to 2015, the snow melt has shifted towards an earlier melt start. We also saw that the trends are largest in coastal plains and in the lowland valleys. The map to the right shows the trend in total snow-free days during summer. So red pixels indicate a significant positive trend. And the histogram shows the distribution of pixels per elevation, and it confirms that the largest positive trends are found at the lowest elevations. Next slide, please. So the trends that we found in snow cover, are they reflected in changes in the sea ice? We looked at monthly mean values of sea ice area and monthly mean values for the snow cover on land, and we investigated if there are changes over the period or if the changes follow each other in some way. And we found that the snow cover variability in the lowlands indeed does correlate with changes in sea ice in the surrounding seas. So if you focus on the green line in this figure, it shows the correlation coefficient as function of land pixel elevation for sea ice area during the month of June against snow cover extent also for June. So we found the highest correlation when we included only pixels up to 50-meter elevation from the snow cover. And solid line means that that there's a significance to the 5% P level. So for snow cover in June and sea ice in June, we found that the significance was up to 250 meters. So the variability in lowland snow cover correlates with the variability in sea ice in the lowlands. That was our main finding. And more discussion and details are found in the report. Next slide, please. Our recommendations, they include that a coupling of available snow information from ground observations and satellite observations with high-resolution snow models would provide a combination of both good spatial distribution and a long temporal coverage, which would be really helpful to use to understand the relationship between ecosystem processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and can you mute your phone? Or is there someone else having the phone on, the microphone on? Ah, good. So the next speaker is Roberto Sassano.
Can you hear me?
Atmospheric pollution research.
Yes.
National Research Council of Italy. Sorry, here you go.
Can you hear me, Christiane?
Yes.
Okay. So good morning. The aim of this chapter is to create an overview about the time-lapse cameras operating in Svalbard. This is a joint effort of different SIOS member institutions, and we started to approach this kind of methodology, terrestrial photography, preparing a website. Next slide, please. In Svalbard, several cameras are operating or are not still maintained, but we have a lot of data sources available. So we prepared a website in order to start a survey about this kind of applications. These are alternative and complementary approaches useful for different kind of purposes, from remote sensing to snow cover applications, as well as to ecological applications. The first step was to identify this kind of devices available, and we started to contact each data provider in order to have more information about this kind of applications. Next slide, please. We identified about 60 cameras operating in Svalbard, and we recognized that many different setups or sensors are used, as well as different processing algorithm can be considered. We found that most of the cameras are maintained by research institutions, SIOS members or not, and we found also some local private companies that are interested on maintaining this kind of device. For this purpose, we try to define a metadata profile in order to organize all the details that can describe this kind of application. We found different spatial resolutions, different applications, and at the end, next slide, please. We considered data sources that are more advanced in terms of data processing levels. We considered the Ny Alesund area since we have the longest time series available in Svalbard. We can have the Zeppelin camera operated by the Norwegian Polar Institute with images since about 20 years. We have some cameras from CNR, and we are able to process this data in order to retrieve information about the snow cover seasonality. The University of Oslo is operating a camera from another site where they found a way to provide data useful for remote sensing purposes. This can be done aggregating the data with the satellite grids. And the next one, we identified also other data sources in the Adventalen area and in the Örnsund area, where we can find application devoted to remote sensing or to ecological applications. In fact, the absence of snow cover is an important issue for vegetation studies. We prepared the ground for an harmonized approach. And the next one, we defined some recommendations about this kind of applications. We propose to promote the creation of a network based on this type of methodology. We invite the community to increase this kind of application in Svalbard. We need more cameras in other sites, not only located in shoreline locations, but also in high mountain and remote areas. We would continue to maintain this kind of information for the community. We would continue to this kind of survey, and we would promote the creation of an harmonized methodology useful for obtaining information about the snow cover in different sites. For more details, you can look at the chapter, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. So the last three chapters were quite closely connected. So the lead authors of these three chapters, they developed a joint chapter on snow cover. This will now be presented by Eric again.
Thank you. So we were asked, the three projects were asked to present a common chapter and some recommendations. So what we focused on was to look at the different scales and temporal resolutions available from the different sensor types. And the figure to the right is a attempt to address this. Next slide. The three projects, as already have been mentioned, was the SAT Mod Snow, the Svalsia, and the PASSES projects. Next slide. The highlights, we provided a description of how snow cover can be approached at different spatial and temporal scales. Availability of long-term time series is the key for observing climate changes. Terrestrial photos offer high-resolution spatial and time ground truth for satellite images. Long-term climate data for terrestrial snow on Svalbard, including models for snow mass, for instance. Snow cover and snow off dates are important in many scientific disciplines. Time series allow us to study the relationship between models and satellite data. Next. In summary, long-term time series, both ground-based and remote sensing, is a critical task in climate monitoring. Networks of cameras can be used to validate remote sensing data. Links between cameras, high resolution remote sensing, for instance, Sentinel-2, and lower resolution Earth observation data like MODIS or AVHR could be studied to extend the time series back to 1982 at least. Studies can be carried out to understand the relationships between snow cover and other biogeophysical processes such as sea ice and vegetation. Next. The common recommendations from the three projects is that intercomparisons and intercalibrations of snow products from coarse scale via medium scale and detailed scale up to sub-meter scale using cameras could be investigated. Detailed melting patterns can be understood. SIOS Svalbard super site for remote sensing of snow should be established to provide sustained in situ reference snow measurements that can be used in CalVal activities. Attempts should be made to map, harvest, and maintain, if possible, all kinds of Earth observation products of snow cover over the archipelago and validate, quantify errors in each of the data sets. Assimilation of Earth observation data in snow hydrology and snow process models needs to be further investigated. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. So we are coming to the last chapter, which will be presented by Hanne Christiansen, also from UNIS. Hanne, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good, I can hear you.
Very, very nice. So it's a pleasure to present the story about what has been going on in the permafrost community with relationships to SIOS as the last chapter today. I'm doing this on behalf of my colleagues in Svalbard, as you can see, coming from Norway, Italy, Poland, and Germany, and Russia. And if you click Christiana, you'll be able to see the group of people that actually works with this. And I'm very happy to stress today that we did actually have a workshop, a physical one, back when we started doing our contribution to the very first SESS report in 2018. And that has actually made a very strong foundation for collaboration and for identifying what we want to do within SIOS. And so we developed this chapter focusing on some new parts of permafrost related research, addressing what's the drilling infrastructure, what's the ground ice content, but also for the first time starting to look into time series of permafrost. Click. When you want to understand what is the permafrost thermal state, which is one of the ECVs of permafrost and which is what we're working with, you need to have access into the ground. And if you want to have access deeper than 3 to 4 meters, you typically need to use a drill rig. So what we have done in this chapter is to provide you with an overview of what's actually existing drilling methods and equipment that we have in Svalbard. And you can see on the right part of this figure that there are generally 2 methods to drill. Either you hammer into the ground, that's the D figure, and that's what you see on the photos C and B, using on B a big drill rig on Jansenhaugen and C a medium scale drill rig in Indalen in central Svalbard. But you can actually also core into the permafrost. So that's A, B, and C, where you see the permafrost coming into the core barrel. And if you look at photo A, you can see such a, what we call a single core barrel. And that way you get to obtain the permafrost content in a core. When you look down at D and F figures, you are able to see the equipment that is existing. F is the drill rig we have purpose-built for permafrost at Unis, and that in central Svalbard. And that we are actually refining in the Infranor project going on recently to try to core into the different types of sediment, which is the big challenge in permafrost. And the D is the drill rig that is situated in Hornsund. On photo E, you see the Russian hand coring equipment that has been used in Barentsburg. Next, please. So when you have your core, you are able to actually study what's inside the permafrost. It's exactly like ice cores. And what you see on this photograph is just a representation of the variability. In the photos A, B, and C, you see that there's very, very little ground ice content. In D and E, there's lenses of ice, that's the gray part, and that represents thus much more ground ice content. And if you click one more time, Christiana, then you'll be able to see that what we've done in this chapter is that we've pulled together all the evidence we have from the different boreholes in Svalbard. And I have to say that we also realized that it's only half of the boreholes that present data on temperatures in the permafrost that actually has a detailed stratigraphical, cryostratigraphical record, as is what we call the collection of data we have from the boreholes. What you can see on this figure is that when you go particularly into a lowland valley, such as Atvandalen, you can have a quite high ground ice content, particularly close to the top of the permafrost, whereas when you proceed further down in the permafrost, it's relatively low ice content, somewhere between 20–40%, and even lower when you look into bedrock. More details in the report. Next one, please. We've also looked, of course, at the ground thermal state. And what you're looking at here is just a meteorological highlight for some period back in time. And what we can see is that 2016 represented a peak in the air temperatures. Since then, it's been decreasing slightly. And you can also see that 2016 represented a peak when it comes to precipitation. If you click one more time, then you have the data resolved for the 3 hydrological years, so 2016-17 and up till 2018-19. Only from the Longyearbyen area, where you can actually see that air temperatures is relatively stable. And you can see that there's been a significant decrease in the amount of precipitation, almost 100 millimeters, particularly in the autumn. If you click one more time, we'll have a look into what that means for the permafrost. On the left-hand side of this little lower figure, you see that in the top of the permafrost, the temperatures is generally decreased. When we go down to around the depths of 0 annual amplitude, typically 10 and further down meters, you see that the temperature is still relatively stable, in some cases even increasing. And if you do one more click, we can see what is the effect on the other ECV of permafrost, the active layer thickness. It's also been relatively stable, some smaller changes, but you can observe one point that is called Breinosa that has actually increased or almost doubled in active layer thickness. And that's of course due to the combination that we have much less precipitation, thus much more air circulation in this block field area. So this landform then reacts differently with the active layer thickness. Next one, please. So our recommendations is to always collect the ground ice and stratigraphy information from long-term permafrost observation sites, click, and consider to expand the permafrost observation network. As many others pointed out today, most of the observations is from the western and central part of Svalbard, as you've seen from the names, and we still do not have much going on the eastern part, click. One other thing that we have identified, I noticed that in the beginning, someone talked about this chapter being geohazards. It's certainly not much to do with geohazards yet, but what we know in order to deal with geohazards is to know more about what's the ground ice in the slopes, which we don't know at the moment. And last one, click. We also would very much like to see that the permafrost ECVs could get online and thus more accessible, and also as they are part of the SIOS core data, become more operational that way. So that's also what we will be recommending and working on in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. Yes, I see we're running out of time already. So I think what now it would have been time for questions. Are there any questions from the YouTube channel?
No, there is no.
Okay, then I suggest actually that the authors check the chat box and answer the questions in the chat box. There have been 20 or a bit less than 22 questions, but there have been questions coming in quite continuously. So please answer the questions in the chat box, and we continue right away to the chair of the SIOS board of directors, who will share some reflections with us. Just a second. There we go. Kim, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We are a consortium working on the Svalbard Integrated Art Observing System, building an observing system together. Next. Today, we have had the event presenting the annual SESS report. It's a ceremonious moment. It's also a solemn moment. I'm very humbled by all the fantastic work that everyone has produced. And it is also dignified for SIOS. The SIOS SESS reports are very important for showing that we are a functioning consortium. I will reflect a little bit in a few moments on, if you look at the title, The State of Environmental Science in Svalbard, we present the state of the science itself, but we as a community are certainly the experts on Svalbard, and we should also be presenting information. We've seen data today, but in general, we should also emphasize the development of various entities, parameters in Svalbard. Next. This figure we use very much in SIOS to guide how we develop the observation system, how we innovate and get better data. And as you see in the middle on the top, the SESS report is an essential element of actually driving the annual wheel forward. And if we go to the next slide. This is the third SESS report. We have you have been extremely productive. We have 113 authors with 48 institutions this year from 12 nations and 68 recommendations. And it has been increasing and incredible amount of energy amongst you all. Next. In fact, it's about 230 authors. There are some productive people that have been on several chapters, but we have a grand total of 147 recommendations. That's less than 2 people per recommendation. We really have a lot of recommendations that we should then pursue. So next. In this slide, I have taken the liberty as chair of the board of directors to put in some personal reflections. If you disagree, please disagree as we move on into 2021. But I feel with the 147 recommendations, we must consolidate, consolidate, and consolidate again. So next. We must merge and refine recommendations. There is an effort within SIOS to build a roadmap for implementation during 2021. And of course, there are working groups, but it is important that the chapter owners are active here. Next. We have seen some examples today. There is a lot ongoing, but I nevertheless want to put it forth. We must promote cross-chapter thinking. The SESS report, the SIOS is a meeting ground for very many subjects. It's very seldom that we actually talk science, but actually from the different fields we come together. And we might see synergies, possibilities, and we need to work with that in order to consolidate down from the 147 recommendations. Next. This is more at the macro level, but certainly also the authors themselves, the SIOS KC, and we all must work to ensure that institutions are interested also in what the energy of the scientist is producing, such that we get long-term measurements where appropriate and important. Next. And as I hinted at, alluded to a few moments ago, we must fill the chapters with new information and new data as we go along. So next. And one of the aspects of doing that, which has led the board to come to the conclusion that we will only have updates of chapters in 2021. And we will only solicit new chapters every other year because we are drowning in recommendations. I was very strong on the argument that we should have a SESS report every year. We will have a SESS report every year, but we must also catch up with ourselves. It has been a very big strain on the Knowledge Center and to produce these SESS reports at the rate and volume that we have had. So next, please. Nevertheless, we need to populate an editorial board for the 2021 SESS report. We have just finished one. We are very grateful for the work that the present editorial board has done, excellent work. But if you are interested or have a name to suggest, please submit your name to information@sios.svalbard.org. And next. I, as chairman of the board of directors, I want to thank everyone for the great achievements with the SESS report, this year's SESS report, but all the SESS reports. Your contributions make the SESS report the strongest foundation of SIOS, and when we present how we try to ensure that SIOS is producing funding for institutions and for researchers, the SESS report is certainly one of our strongest cards to play. And of course, it's your contributions that make it possible. I finally want to say that none of this great success would not have happened without Heikki's contribution, and in very particularly Christiane Hübner, who has carried an extreme burden, our moderator during this morning session. So thank you all. It is humbling to see all your work.
Thank you, Kim. Also from me, I would like to say a big thank you to all of that contributed to the SESS reports throughout the years, both the authors, the reviewers, and the editorial boards. It's a pleasure to work with the SESS report at you. We are now coming to an end of the live stream, and I would like to thank the people that followed us on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. We will now continue with the break, and we reconvene at, or the internal meeting will continue at 11 a.m. And we will work, or we will start with a workshop on the SESS report to discuss a little bit, basically also what you said, Kim, in your reflections.